Framer began in 2014, and it is a prototyping tool. So it began as FramerJS, which was developed to work like a regular JavaScript framework. It was, and it still is, an open source project on GitHub. FramerJS is bundled with Framer Generator, an application that allows you to import layers directly out of Photoshop and Sketch. And this is, the FramerJS and Framer Generator is really great to use on Windows. Also, if you want to just like try it out in CodePen, you can use that. However, there's also now just Framer, which is also known as Framer Studio. And it's a fully fledged Mac-only IDE that allows you to build really amazing prototypes. Also, you should know I believe it costs like $129 now, but it's definitely worth every penny. This is the project on GitHub. I highly, like, if you just want to start playing around with it a little bit, I highly recommend CodePen. And this is what it looks, the IDE looks like. Okay, so Framer uses CoffeeScript, which is just like JavaScript, but not really. It used to be like the cool new thing a few years ago, like maybe 2010, but maybe it was never really that cool at all. Unsure. So some people refer to it as like really JavaScript, the good parts, and I think there's some truth to that, but also some non-truth to that. Some important aspects of it. So like Python, you use indentation, no semicolons. You never specify var, use existence instead of undefined or null, which is actually really awesome. And then you have the arrow called the dash rocket for functions. And you can also use any sort of JavaScript library with it. So CoffeeScript versus CSS, I actually feel like, so the base unit that you use in any Framer projects is the layer. And the way you write out a layer feels very similar to CSS properties. And really, like, this maybe takes like a couple of hours to like start getting used to, and then, you know, it feels like, I mean, as long as you write like JavaScript every day, you'll pretty much get used to it pretty easily. But let's talk about prototyping. I sort of like, I don't know how I came into this role. I don't even know what like my role exactly is. But I started out as like a full stack engineer, and then I just really enjoyed working on product. And I discovered prototyping, which is really about creating a model of your product that can be tested by users before you expend valuable development time and money on creating the actual product you're going to be building. There's a saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But you know, the year is like 2016. We all work in web or mobile development, and I think like a more accurate saying is a prototype is worth 1,000 words. I've also heard this said as like a prototype is worth like 1,000 meetings. But I think that's just really being dramatic. I mean, but the point is that static screens are no longer enough. Like, we have the ability to build so much more than that. And diagrams aren't enough, and wireframes aren't enough. And I've done enough consulting work over the last like 2 to 3 years to know that sometimes people are like, oh, do you want to look at my app? Here are like some PNGs. Figure it out. You can totally understand how this is all gonna like work. So some of the really important reasons why you should prototype, well, also what it helps you do. It helps you validate an idea. You can really quickly build something. Ideas are really cheap, but once you get into production, building products becomes very expensive. Building new features becomes very expensive. You want to be able to communicate your vision, not just with your customers, but also with your team. It's also, it's living documentation. That's basically like a prototype is worth 1,000 words. Let's make it happen. Creates a shared understanding of your product. Again, there's so many people working on it, and you all want to understand at the end of the day what you're trying to build. And then as I was doing research for this talk, I also came across someone referring to it as virtual whiteboard, which I really like. So as I mentioned, I've worked with companies who are like, hey, we have an app. It's mock-ups, but like you can figure it out. And it makes me always think of this quote, which is, you don't see things as they are, you see things as you are. What happens is that you bring your biases, you bring your history, you bring your assumption into whatever you're looking at. And unless what you're looking at is incredibly clear, we all are going to understand it differently because we're all different people. So let's briefly talk about the prototyping landscape. It is crowded. There are so many tools available. They all do different things. You may have used other ones. You probably should know 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these. And it really depends on the project what is best to use. So when I discovered Framer, we were very much working, the company I was working for was very much in this like page-based prototyping, which is what a lot of InVision is. You essentially, you create pages and you like hotspot the crap out of those pages. And then you make some changes and then you like redo the hotspotting. So the difference with Framer and some other tools is that it's layer-based. So you create your mock-ups in Sketch, in Photoshop. You ideally organize your layers properly. This doesn't work if you don't organize your layers properly. And then you animate based on each layer. And so I tried to find, like, if I didn't know how familiar people would be with this stuff, as this is a JavaScript meetup, so I try to find an illustration. So for example, this is InVision, and you have a button to create the interaction. You like basically put this rectangle over it, which is the hotspotting. You have to tell it on what action and where to go next. With layer-based, you essentially like, so in this, you have something like the background, you have the overlay, and then you have all these different options. And so you need all this to be really organized so that once you decide to animate something, you can use that specific name. Okay. So yeah, Framer is very cool. And I really wanted to, I was trying to get a lot of videos in of the really incredible things that you can do with this stuff. So if you, some of these, if you go there, some of these are videos, some are not videos, but you should spend hours on there. Like if you're interested in this stuff, and you can, it's a rabbit hole. And at one point I was also really interested in talking about like the nitty-gritty of like what I once did, like the different ways we've used prototypes, like our different iterations. And then I realized there's so much cool stuff being built with Framer, and our app was unfortunately not that cool. So I wanted to show you guys this. So this is a prototype for Facebook Live. As you can see, you can deliver interaction, animation, motion, Do you care how your app moves? Do you care how the user interface reacts? Do you care how the user interacts with the app? So I have a couple of other examples. Oh no. I have presenter notes open and this. Nope, okay, that didn't work. But hopefully this one will. Nope, oh no. Okay. So it should play. Is it playing? It is playing, okay. And I mean, you know, it's also 2016. It's the year when data visualization is becoming so important. And I don't anticipate this ever becoming less important. So how do you prototype visualization? And then, of course, one thing that I should have mentioned is that you can use this for web, mobile, Apple Watch. There are lots of different options. Okay, so some really great features that I wanted to make sure I shared with you. Super easy to share. My layer center, this is like the greatest thing ever if you've ever struggled to like center something. Also, something really interesting is that you can pull live data. You can use the APIs. You can use the accelerometer. You can also, I haven't done this, but you can actually take whatever you've built, you can wrap it with Cordova, and you can actually release it as an app. And all of this, in terms of prototyping, like people always say, well, I know how to code. Why don't I just like code this? Why do I have to like learn something? Why do I have to like pay money for something? All of this is actually easier and faster. There's so many like, code snippets, and there's so many like previous demos built that it just makes a lot of sense. And I just also wanted to talk about the limitations. You do have to code. I mean, like, I don't think it's a big deal in this meetup, but not all designers want to learn how to code. Not all designers. Actually, it's... I don't know if I should share this, but if you go on Quora, there's actually like almost like anti-framer like Quora trolls, and not really. Like I say this like because you know like Quora is a very like nice little platform, but there's people who are definitely 100% like anti-framer. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. But as we think about the future and as we think about like some of the cool new technologies. And I'm really excited about like AR. Well, Framer can't really do anything about that. I tried to find a demo with VR and I actually found one, but it's sort of like really wonky. But with AR, I really couldn't find anything. So where does this app go? And as cool and useful as it is in 2016, like what happens? What happens in 2018? 2020. Also, one thing that I don't want to put in my slide, but I think is a real limitation, the community for this is entirely based on Facebook. So if you don't log into Facebook, you probably will need to log into Facebook. So I've been struggling with my laptop all day, and I wanted to do a demo, but I don't think I'll be able to. But I do have like one thing that I also wanted. It's another very cool thing. I'm sorry, I spent hours on this. But it's just sort of like building something that you might not be able to do outside of code, and it's building it like fairly fast. I have looked at the code; it's very doable. Anyway, so you should think about trying this out. Oh, I'm good at this. I got this. So getting started, there are tons of docs on the Framer website. Highly recommend. a blog post that I reference is the 16 prototype tools and how each can be used. It's a really great Medium article. And then there's actually a collection of pens on CodePen by Jay Stakelin. I've actually gone through most of those at one point. They're really useful. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks for having me.